spread it even if you don't have symptoms. Now I'm going to group these next 5 stories into one big segment, and it is how George Floyd and the movement for justice for him is changing the entire world. First off, in New Zealand, the government decided to abandon plans for armed patrols because residents are nervous that it will lead to their police being militarized like ours. And that's just wild to me. The police aren't armed over there? That's just such a foreign concept to all of us here in the US. Like, the police truly are community servants over there. And one reason that I heard about why Canadian police are nicer, I think could transfer over to this, is that the percentage of people who own firearms is so low almost everywhere else in the world. So the police don't have to worry about their own safety every time they pull someone over. Like, there's not some kind of crazy person with a gun in their glove box. So a little bit of a side note, it just seems like it's a utopian universe over in New Zealand right now. No cops with guns, coronavirus cases at 0, literally 0, and their communities are worried about the possibility of police getting too militarized and discriminating against their citizens. Like, I don't know, man, New Zealand has their stuff together right now. Next up, back at home here, the US military is open to discussions about renaming the 10 army posts named after Confederate generals, after they said they weren't just this February. Over the weekend, they already issued commands to, quote, identify and remove the display of the Confederate battle flag or its depiction within workplaces, common access areas, and public areas on their installations. Now for me, just as an outsider looking in, don't all of these names and pictures of the battle flag in their workplace go completely against who the military is? Like, the Confederacy literally tried to beat the crap out of you in order to protect slavery. So if you're supposed to be protecting America, doesn't a group who wants to break away from the US go completely against your whole ideology? I think this story was just a wake-up call for me and hopefully all of us to look around and question why anything related to the Confederacy is still up and worshipped. I don't really buy the whole idea that it's just history, because as many people have said, I kind of think history belongs in a museum, and these are just monuments that are keeping the idea alive. Our third story in this group is that IBM is completely pulling out of the market for general-purpose face recognition technology because they've been getting backlash saying it promotes discrimination and racial injustice. That seems like a big deal to me because I can only imagine how much money it took for the research and development to get facial recognition to the place it's at. And for them to just abandon it, that is incredible. Now, IBM is just one company, but they're a fairly large player in the tech space, so they could really be a trendsetter here. Our fourth story here is that in France, there have also been widespread protests. So the Interior Minister has announced that chokeholds are now banned from use by the police and that the technique will not be taught anymore at police academies. The minister said that, quote, no one should risk their life during an arrest, end quote. Wow, that's a concept, isn't it? There was an ongoing commission studying violence by police in France after several incidents over the last 4 years where people have died in their custody. And the people of France were accusing their police force of being racist, so apparently it is not just our police. Finally, wrapping up back home, New York City banned the chokehold as well in a vote of 140 to 3, and this bill was called the Eric Garner Anti-Chokehold Act. It makes any officer who injures or kills a person with a chokehold subject to a Class C felony which carries a possible sentence of up to 15 years in prison. All of these stories, these past 5 stories, and everything that's been happening around the world has made me think of this part from the end of Batman v Superman. So spoiler alert. There's this huge visual in his honor around the place they put the Superman symbol in the ground as a sort of memorial to him. But around it you can see someone wrote in chalk the quote, "If you seek his monument, look around you." Now I interpret that quote as the feeling Superman inspired in people, like just the character and the morals he inspired. But the more literal meaning comes from its origin, which is inscribed on the famous English architect Christopher Wren's grave because he was credited with designing so many buildings, including 52 churches. But I just kept thinking of this quote when I see everything that George Floyd started and the movement has continued all across the world. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before in my life, in my short time here. So as the funeral in Houston for George Floyd takes place today, if you seek his monument, look around you, because change is happening worldwide, and these protests are working. These are 5 absolutely huge stories, and they came about because of George and the movement.